How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Hope everyone is doing well. I have a special video today with a special guest. Me and my guy Chuck from Chucking Darts are going to react to your 2025 draft hot takes. I know people always have lots of opinions about literally everything in the draft. No different. So I asked for your hottest takes on the draft, and we got a crap ton of responses. So we took some, and we're gonna get through some. But anyways, how's it going? Enough of me rambling. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to connect. Not the easiest thing to do, especially this time of year, but I'm glad we were able to find some time. And we got such a great response from your sort of invitation for like an impromptu mailbag. So we're going to have some fun. Thank you very much.
We got a lot of great, responses. I guess not questions in this case, though. Some of them were phrased as a question. But yeah, I mean, there's always going to be a certain level of just X player is better than X player. But there were a lot of really good, insightful questions that we got. And I think it's telling to me, out of probably at least 100 plus questions or submissions I got across platforms, I don't think one of them was about Cooper Flag. Nobody is thinking about Cooper Flag right now, myself included.
Yeah, I mean, he went out and he did what he surpassed. I would say my expectations, and my expectations were that he was going to be the clear-cut number one pick, and so
yeah,
it's
phenomenal.
just a credit to him. He was
it's
tremendous.
A good heuristic for how if a prospect is truly that level, it's like, oh yeah, nobody is even considering being fraudulent or fake. No one's even positing it really anymore. Even the Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey over him noise is pretty much calmed, I think, unless you're Paul George, but.
Yeah, well, right. I think what's important now is that we're just in a happy place. In November, if he starts his career shooting 40% from the field for 2 weeks, it'll all come rushing back. But for right now,
will be had. Yes,
it's a very happy time. So yeah, I agree. It's good to have nice, peaceful consensus like that.
For sure, it is, because we have such little nice, peaceful consensus everywhere else. But let's get into it. Make sure to like and subscribe the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel. As always, the support is so great, and I appreciate everyone who watches and follows. And also go follow Chuck. I'll link his stuff down. But anyways, first question. It's actually two questions that I'm linking together because I have a plan here. At infinity02331.bsky social says Cedric Coward will be the third best player from this draft. And at Fabulous Results from YouTube, I believe, says Drake Powell will be a top 3 player from this class. So these are two guys who I had a fair amount of people asking about and sending stuff about. Coward for sure. But, I think it's interesting to think about, is there a world where these players become the third best player in a draft, which I guess could be, depending on draft. But to me, in this draft, whoever the third best player in this class is going to be a damn good player. So I'll let you start with this one, Chuck. How you feeling about Cedric Coward and or Drake Powell as very high picks at the moment?
Yeah, I think I'm split in that I like the challenge to the top 3, though I think both those submissions, while spicy, I think the choice of top 3 was very intentional there, because they're we're not saying better than Dylan Harper, just everybody else, just everyone else.
Oh yeah, they're hedging their bets just a little bit.
But I think challenging the consensus at that level, I think, is a smart thing to do. Both in just my conception of the class and in the fact that I think it's very likely that the top 5 picks are going to match what the top 5 RSCI rankings were before the season, not in order, but those 5 were Cooper, Dylan, Ace, VJ, and Trey Johnson. And I think
it's really the top 5 in RSCI.
Yes, yeah,
that's crazy. I didn't realize they were literally top 5. That's all. That's so funny. I wonder when the last time that happened is. That's got to be rare.
I think it's a great question, but I think it's certainly, that sort of anchoring bias. And when I say the word bias, it feels like I'm being overly critical of those players, because each of them have a case to be taken that high, certainly. But I think it can sort of set a narrative and set in concrete stuff that should continuously be re-examined. And I like re-examining in this format. Now, for Cedric and Drake specifically, each one of those guys has attributes that a couple of those players in the top 5 do not have. Cedric, with his dimensions, has more just sort of classic high-end starter or star dimensions with that wingspan, that 7'2" wingspan at 6'6", and he moves very, very fluidly. So I can see the temptation, because I've been tempted myself, to project very, very high outcomes onto him. Drake is probably just, with his combine performance and everything, just sort of end to end, a more athletic player, maybe not than VJ, but certainly from some of those other guys who are in that top 5.
I think you can make a case.
You could.
Reasonably enough.
And so it's just that with both, you are projecting a ton of skill acquisition and skill improvement, because I think they are both raw on the ball and like raw off the ball in some circumstances. So if you want
plenty of room to grow. Yeah.
And if you look, they're the guys who do grow radically in the NBA tend to be guys with a lot of athletic tools to fall back on, because when they acquire a little bit of skill, their athleticism tends to amplify it. And it just sort of, that's their curve, but I would say that with both of them specifically, in Drake's case, because I guess Drake was the more, heralded recruit coming into this year as a one and done guy. I think his 3-point stroke, which I think is okay, like the volume either really needs to come up and he needs to get a lot more comfortable on the ball and making decisions. I understand that with his context at North Carolina with RJ Davis there is a lot of usage already accounted for. Ian Jackson was playing out of his mind for the first little bit of that season and kind of surpassed him in the rotation. But like, it's for guys with that low of a usage as a one and done player, it's very hard, even over the course of multiple NBA contracts, to acquire the amount of skill to return top 3 value, because you're always going to be scrounging for minutes. If you thought the rotation in North Carolina was steep to get on ball reps, go to literally any NBA team, and there's going to be multiple guys that team has already invested in, either recently in a draft or with a big contract, to handle the ball. And Drake's concern, especially since he's probably going to be taken after Cedric and likely late first round at highest. For Drake, it's going to be, what do I need to do to get on the floor and stay on the floor? That's going to be his step one. And I think there's pathways for him to do that, but those pathways are likely not to include get into your bag and experiment on the ball in a way that you did not do in college. He will likely remain low usage, focus on his defense and his off-ball game. And so the skill acquisition that I think he would need to return a top 3 value he would have to add and add and add and add like every year for like 10 plus years. It's just, it's very, very aggressive and not something that I would bet on for him. And I can talk about Cedric as well, but I want to give you the chance to chime in on Drake about how you feel.
Yeah, no, I agree. As a quick aside, while you've been talking, I've been going through all of 247's just basketball recruiting stuff, and I think the top 5 RSCI going top 5 thing has never happened. I don't think it's
no way. Crazy.
It goes back to 1990, or I think 1999 is when their database goes back to. The closest were in 2016. In 2016, it was Josh Jackson, Markelle Fultz, Tatum Ball, and Harry Giles. And
okay. And Harry got hurt.
This is so accurate. It was Fox, Isaac, and Dennis Smith. That one is absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
And then 2017 is close-ish. It was Bag. Like all those guys went high. And if not for Porter, it's obviously injury stuff. Who knows? But yeah, it seems like this is legitimately a historic thing that you've pointed out, which is I'm going to get to Drake Powell in a sec, but I just think that's really cool. This is an event.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the other one was 2013 was Andrew Wiggins, Julius Randle, Jabari Parker, Aaron Gordon, but then Andrew Harrison. Shout out Andrew Harrison.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And I think maybe it's a credit to RSCI improving like their work. I mean, you could view it that way, but if you look at
view it that way, but then Justin Edwards and Aaron Bradshaw were top 5 a year ago. So who knows?
Yeah.
It's a tough thing. High school scouting is tough.
And when you look at sort of party crashers to actually be selected in the top 5 this year, I think all of them have each of them have enough questions either that were already in their game or coming out of the combine that it doesn't feel like there's a really like a player.
Yeah, I don't think that's obvious. That's not the locked in top 5 by any means. I don't think.
Yeah,
I could into the top 5 for sure.
You think so? You think there's a good chance that like Utah or Philly or
see it? Could totally see Morey going for Kon or like I don't know if Charlotte would draft Kon, but they should. They've needed a player like him in LaMelo's entire career, like probably since Kemba, honestly.
I am a huge Kon fan, so yeah, I would love for whoever.
We'll talk about Kon shortly, but Drake Powell, yeah, I mean, I guess I feel similarly about Coward and Powell. I'm not crazy high on either, but I'm like, if I squint, I can get it. Like. Powell is just the freakiest athlete, and I think he had some interesting flashes on the ball of, some wide dribble passing, some just overwhelmingly explosive driving creation. Defensively had some really good moments. But yeah, like you said, it's just tough to get reps at that age in the NBA when you're a project. And I kind of worry about this with Coward too, just because he's older. At least he has some reps under his belt, but Coward has really struggled against most of the high-level competition, the high major teams that he's played. I think the only good statistical game he had was Cincinnati last year. Iowa this year he really struggled. USC last year I think was one where he struggled in. But yeah, so these guys are going to have to find reps, whether that's in the G League, and I think the G League can be helpful. But I would generally feel like college reps I trust more for development than G League reps.
Yes. Oh, certain by magnitude.
Yeah, just much more reliable. So you can develop that way, and if Powell goes to a team like Brooklyn or Utah, who's a lot of picks and just can play him, then that's actually probably fine. Honestly, I think that's the best case scenario. Is just getting your real NBA reps. That's just obviously hard to do. Most teams aren't willing to do it. Like I think teams are becoming more willing to do it. Like you see what Washington was so open last year, just about like, hey, we're not going to be that good this year. We're going to play our young guys a lot and see what we have. And that's I commend them for being so open about that approach, because it's like, yeah, you're probably taking a few games off the table here, but like you're benefiting significantly in the long term. But anyways, most teams still aren't like that. And Coward, I think, is less likely to be like a top 3 guy, even though I think he's a better prospect. Just think Drake has like the physical upside where it's like, yeah, there's like that's a truly like S tier special trait, his explosiveness at his size, and anything could happen. Whereas Coward, I think, is very good, but I don't think he has any like true like S tier special things he does. Like he's a very good shooter. He's a very promising defender. I don't think he's super impactful now, but that's the case with a lot of college players. Like some of the processing is interesting, but I just don't think he's going to be anything more than a complimentary player. I think he can be a good one, or maybe even like it would probably have to be something with like his fluidity and like flexibility and like the touch kind of extending to like pull up shot making. Would probably be the idea for him getting to like, like Mikal Bridges-ish, not necessarily in the same way. Like they're different players. Like the guy who was like low usage off ball and turn into a pull up mid range guy. But anyways, yeah, I like the energy for both of these, and I'm more in favor of Drake Powell. But who knows? Anything can happen.
For what it's worth, if I had to pick one, I would pick Coward because of that fluidity and the wingspan. Really, knowing that he's already a good shooter. Hard to find.
He's just going to get more reps too. Yeah. Probably. I mean, I think he's not ready to play in the NBA, especially like high leverage minutes. Most rookies aren't.
Right.
But he's closer than Powell, and the shot will get him on the floor.
Right.
Anything else on these two immediately?
No, but I'm glad we started with them. I think it's the right place to begin.
Because the next question, which ties into this question, is from @who_knows. Rasheer Fleming and Cedric Coward have better projections to playoff basketball than any of the consensus 3+, they listed Bailey, Edgecombe, Kon, Trey, etc. I think it's really interesting. I've seen a lot of people discussing like 16 game versus 82 game prospects and like who they think are contributing in the playoffs. And it's obviously really easy to do because the playoffs are right in front of us.
Right.
But yeah, I'm going to take this one at first, not just for Rasheer and Coward. I have a little bit of a bone to pick with like the whole with like 82 versus 16 game prospect analysis. It's just a little rigid to me. Like these guys are going to grow so much in their like role and archetype where they're like, yeah, there are certain types of players who don't as often succeed in the playoffs, like non-shooters, right? Like perimeter non-shooters, smaller guards. That doesn't mean there's none of them. And that doesn't mean they don't succeed and can't succeed. But back to the actual question, I feel pretty good about all the guys you listed in the consensus being at least playoff contributors because of their shooting. Like I think I don't love all of these prospects, but it's a really, really high level shooting class.
And you're talking about the guys who are already towards the top. Trey, Kon, Ace,
Trey,
right,
Edgecombe, and yeah. And Kon were the ones that the person listed. So I'm just going off of that as well. I always think it bodes well for future impact complementary players to have been like a real featured player at some point, which is something I don't think Coward, I think, can claim more. Fleming, I would worry a little bit more offensively, at least. I think defensively he can be fucking awesome, but on offense, it's not a guarantee to me. But yeah, I think I trust the consensus top guys. I'm not like perfectly aligned with consensus on order, but I feel like most of the lottery consensus guys, aside from like one or two, I'm pretty cool with being lottery picks this year, which isn't always the case for me. But yeah, I think Kon, I feel super good about just because of, I think he's the shooting, the passing. I think his defense is going to be good enough. I think I'm pretty confident about Ace, assuming his like development breaks right, but you need to say that for everyone, right? Like for Coward and Fleming, especially. And then like Trey, maybe, but like, we saw the value a guy like Buddy Hield or even like a Malik Beasley brought in playoffs. Like those guys aren't necessarily world beaters, but they're players who teams relied on and for good reason. VJ is the one I could see like I could see going wrong the easiest, just because I think he I think he's a good shooting prospect and I believe in the shot, but he's not the level of the other three, and he really needs the shooting, in my opinion, to be a good player, because I don't view him as like a blue chip half court creator. I do think he's going to shoot, but it's not guaranteed. So I think the playoff viability, but I do think Fleming with his like physicality is definitely an interesting kind of bet there.
Yeah, I've been meaning to have an episode dedicated to the mid-major prospects in this class, because I think in terms
you're a
of
big
just
Fleming guy, right?
I have been, but he's like it's the temptation. It's like the Tantalus, with Rasheer, because I go back and forth. He
does like probably the craziest stuff of any prospect in this class on defense. Like his high, maybe not above Cooper and like Murray Boyles, but like the stuff that he does as like a point of attack defender at his size and like a helper in passing lanes is just ridiculous. Like, and he'll like block shots without leaving his feet. Like it's hilarious. I mean,
a 7'5" wingspan for a wing, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't.
No,
and like
it really doesn't.
He, Cedric, Nique, Clifford, Miles Bird, like it's very rare, and Miles returning, right? But it's very.
But
I think so too, from where he was at. But nonetheless, it's just very rare for a prospective draft class to have so many players in the mid-major ranks who like clearly pass the test athletically. Like where not only pass the test, but are like arguably near the top of the class in terms of physical and athletic projection.
Yaxel,
another one, absolutely.
Anymore, but
and so I hadn't, like, the scheduling never worked for me to like really try to give the class its flowers on that regard before a couple of these guys started to trickle back.
That's a good point. I feel like I don't think of them as like a group, but it is a pretty good mid-major class.
I thought so. It's gotten lighter for sure, but I think when it comes to again, comparing Cedric to Rasheer, I think the reason those names are possibly brought up is a lot having to do with just this physical projection. Because if you watch the tape with either one of them, Cedric, again, it's the limited success and reps versus high major comp. And the A10 is okay, but it's not great. And Rasheer consistently sort of is not quite as dominant as you would want him to be.
He's pretty far away, I think. And like, that's part of my worry is like, he isn't he's like not an old junior. He's going to be 21 on draft, like around draft day. Like, that's fine. But like, he makes a lot of freshman mistakes on both ends. In terms of just like falling asleep on defense and just, taking really bad shots on offense. But like, yeah, I mean, if he's a real shooter, then it probably doesn't matter.
That's the thing is
that's
like,
obviously the big if. He can be. I mean, I'm not like 100% sold on it, but I could imagine it happening.
I think the reason, and I've been tempted at different points to rank Rasheer in like the top 7, top 8, because like if you imagine, well, who's a guy who's going to go outside the top 10 who in whatever 5-8 years we're like, well, of course, then the guy you can shoot who's with a 7'5" wingspan who can move like that with his deflection numbers obviously is a very good candidate. But
his deflection numbers must be insane.
To put it, I guess, concisely, or to try to put it concisely, I think the league is trending toward players who are like high-level playoff contributors are just being guys who can do as much of everything on the court.
For sure.
And Rasheer, to me, is, as a college player, has been more in the specialist zone offensively. He has like really not tried to expand his game that much. He's really just focused on these discrete play finisher and, catch and shoot, some relocation, but just sort of very simple lanes for him.
It's very rudimentary, basic stuff.
And it's hard for me to believe that, again, it's just about this skill acquisition, which is what he would need, even at his like exceptional blessed dimensions, in order to return high value. And I think that you need to have as much of everything. And I think he's got a lot of a couple things, but not enough for me to pull the trigger and say he's gonna have some sort of Aaron Gordon arc or kind of impact.
Exactly. And like Gordon was I mean, I wish Fleming was just like it was like a little more explosive, especially vertically. That would help me quite a bit with his projections, like high level basketball.
Yeah,
but
or he had more of a mean streak or something.
I really do think playoff basketball these days is like less rigid in like what kinds of players can thrive. Like, look at, I don't know, like in terms of not necessarily starters, but like the Pacers have gotten value out of Tony Bradley, and the Knicks have gotten value out of Landry Shamet. And like the Thunder play a bunch of weird players, and like the Wolves, But point being, like, there's a lot of different kinds, and it's not just like, I feel like in the past people were like, oh, you have to be a 3-and-D guy if you're on a star, like a 3-and-D wing. When in reality, like, there aren't a lot of just like true 3-and-D wings that don't offer much else. Like, I think Fleming would probably be the case with Fleming if he ends up panning out. Coward, I could see a little more, but very much an outcome where Coward, his only real value out on offense is shooting or like play finishing. I think that's very possible. Where there aren't really that many examples of that in the playoffs. Like Nesmith, kind of, but he's just like a freak movement shooter at times. I think Christian Brown might be the closest.
Both those guys, in terms of mean streaks, like in terms of the intangibles and the approach, they are very aggressive.
Yeah,
and
very different for sure.
And I think with Cedric and Rasheer, to sort of split them along the positional spectrum, even though they're both considered wings, I think the more likely thing, rather than sort of the on-ball skill acquisition, is for Rasheer to be able to play 5. And I think it's for Coward to be able to guard down and really take opposing ball handlers at point of attack a lot.
Yeah.
And I think Rasheer will be able to switch and all that stuff. But I think if you're really trying to look into them finding a niche that they can thrive in and then blossom off of, it would be that sort of versatility. Rasheer up the lineup and Cedric down the lineup, which I'm not writing off. Like, I still like both of those guys a lot.
I like both. I'm not as crazy on them as like, I think I have both in like the early 20s, late teens range, which I mean, some people are higher on both. Like I like both prospects, but I just think about a player like Peyton Watson, who is like similar dimensions to Fleming while being like an infinitely crazier athlete, like truly special movement, explosion, stuff like him. And like he can't be a full-time player because of the shot. And I don't think that Fleming is going to be as bad of a shooter as Watson, but I do think it shows like even very limited players can have big impacts. And I think teams are more open about that. Like the Thunder barely played Arkansas Jalen Williams all season, and then he was like a very useful like big against Jokic in that Denver series. So I really do believe that like I tried less to focus on what players I think are like playoff built, because coaches are better than ever at like maximizing real talent and real ability. Like coaches I think I trust more now than ever. It's like get the most out of a player with real high level abilities, even if they're not a traditional like playoff guy.
And I will say to piggyback on that, and since we're discussing talent,
is
in contrasting the two, I will say I'm a bit higher on Coward than I am on Rasheer, and I think that in terms like mentioning Arkansas Jalen Williams and sort of how coaches are creative, I think the through line to different kinds of players that find a way to succeed in like seemingly unconventional ways is that they can really buy in and process their responsibilities like very, very quickly, like high feel, essentially, simpler way of saying it.
No doubt.
And I think there is a question about the feel of both these guys because they are both,
especially like, Rasheer, that scares
me. That's what I'm saying is I think that I can project it more to Coward than I can to Rasheer at this point. Yeah.
I mean, you can definitely make that same argument for like an Ace Bailey, right? I mean, that definitely is true, but he just has like, again, it's hard to see it's hard to see a world where like some good coach can't squeeze real value out of a guy like that who can shoot off movement like that and hit shots like that and play defense the way he should be able to. Like, even if he's not a star, which I don't view him as like a future like consistent all-star impact level guy anyways, but that's still like a really damn good player. And obviously I do think, as you said, the through line is feel decision making. Just like that ability to quickly read the game, process, adapt on both ends. We see so many of these guys have it in their own way. But yeah, I think that's the main thing. And like Kon passes that with flying colors, obviously.
Oh,
he's the main one where it's like, he to me is probably the third safest prospect in the class, maybe even second, honestly. But
your music to my ears, brother.
Anyway,
right.
speaking of Kon, unless you had any other notes on this one.
Nope.
At Blue Devil Thought 1 says, VJ, I wonder where this is going. VJ at the moment is a neutral defender. He offsets defensive playmaking with positional mistakes and really struggles with length and leverage. Even examples of smaller guards like Tyrese and Caleb Foster overwhelming him. The hot take is that Kon is as good on them right now. What's interesting to me about this isn't necessarily the take, because I think it's absolutely right. That Kon is probably a more impactful play-to-play defender because VJ is inconsistent. But really just like doesn't matter. Like, is that something that we should be kind of projecting forward so much? So like what do you think of VJ and Kon's defense? Not even necessarily in comparison to each other as much as the way you view them going forward.
I would only accord it some significance in that, like, Kon has more to fall back on offensively immediately anyway, in terms of like, if I had to bet which one of these guys is going to play 20 minutes a night next year, regardless of where they get drafted, I would bet on Kon, just because they're, gravity is gravity and you can't replicate that. And so his defense will get more of a chance to get repped out earlier. And if we think that he's more consistent in his positioning because of, feel what we're talking about.
Yeah, he certainly is. Yeah.
Then it's going to take VJ even longer to sort of catch up and surpass, or sort of banking on a longer road for him. And since VJ doesn't have the offensive consistency, I mean, there's plenty of talent in there. Sure, but since he doesn't have the consistency, I don't want to, again, different player and everything, but you look at how long it's taken Keon Johnson to get a foothold, so to speak, in the league.
That's actually a really interesting one, actually. Yeah.
I like VJ more as a prospect than I did Keon.
He was so
I like Keon fine. I didn't like that Tennessee offense that he and
brutal.
Jaden
I
were
loved
in.
him and Springer too much. I blame Rick Barnes for everything.
But I'm just saying that like we've seen guys like that struggle to get consistent minutes to the point where their weaknesses can like meaningfully improve. And so I like that would be the only projectability question from where they are now
Keon
that I would apply to
was
VJ.
not the level of feel or shooter that VJ is.
I agree. Yeah.
In retrospect, I probably should have been lower on Keon, but I loved him in that cycle. His athleticism was truly special. Is truly just like the freakiest thing ever. With the way that he can move.
Your heart doesn't regret it. That's the important thing.
He's kind of a player that like I think I've I lean on when I'm thinking of like not to be like as high on VJ as some people, just because these guys with like these hyper athletic wings, even like theoretically could be great advantage creators down the line. It's just really hard to develop that. Like it's really hard to improve there. But for VJ, I generally trust his viability because I trust his shot. He's definitely inconsistent on offense, but I think he's going to be like playable because he's going to shoot. Whereas Kon, obviously, but I would be kind of surprised if Kon was a better defender than VJ at their peaks, to be honest. Like I think I trust like these crazy athletic tools guys. Like there's so many examples to me of just like crazy monster athlete, high usage offensive players as freshmen who are, impacts not great on defense in college and end up figuring it out. Like I always think of Jalen Johnson, who I had too low because I was worried about because the defense was like kind of brutal at times in college. And it's like, oh yeah, this guy with freaky length and movement and explosion is gonna figure it out. So VJ, though, obviously I think is again being kind of like a wing in a two guard's body is a little worrying, but
the length is worrying to me. But yeah,
I do trust him to be a very good defender. I think he'll get there eventually.
I think he will certainly have his chances. If Kon ends up being a better defender than VJ long term, then something for VJ like has gone wrong in his career.
Absolutely, absolutely. And but yeah, I mean, I do think want to acknowledge that even though this is from Blue Devil Thoughts,
shout out BDT.
I do think it's correct that Kon is a current, like if you had to give me one guy today on defense, I'd probably take Kon in a neutral team setting. But
probably like where he has to buy into his role and execute.
Yeah, it's not close. Or sorry, it is close. Like it's not. I do think though a lot of people would think that is a hot take. So even though both of us kind of don't think it is, I think a lot of people maybe not as much in a draft Twitter. But anyways, next question from Events Door. I really like this one. I'm much more concerned about Dylan Harper's shooting than Jeremiah Fears' shooting. This one is interesting.
You start. You're the Fears delegate. Yeah. You go ahead.
I think I'm not sure if I agree with this. I think I actually don't because of Harper's pre-college shooting sample from three being more consistent as well. And he does have the volume difference for sure. But if we actually look at it, I prepared for this. If we side by side this,
lovely.
Harper, more efficient from three, shot more threes, more unassisted threes. Fears, however, like the touch indicators, and you can use, I don't know why this is here, more non-rim twos, significantly more efficient and a significantly better free throw shooter. I think the most important stuff to me is still the shooting, the actual 3-point shooting volume versatility at this stage. But I think it's a real argument. And I definitely think that qualifies as a hot take. I don't think people would just like generally, I think if you ask most like, not even casual draft fans, like people who follow the draft, they'd probably think of Harper as a better shooting prospect. But yeah, I really do believe in Fears' shot. Like it is so common for, I mean, the one that always pops in my head is like, I think Anthony Edwards shot like 29% from three his year at Georgia. And like Maxie was really inefficient. Like there's just so many examples of players not hitting threes because one college season is not a stable sample of 3-pointers. But what does stabilize is free throws, and non-rim twos and volume, of course, which is why it matters. But like Fears has incredible touch. He's an awesome floater guy, efficient pull-up 2 shooter, and was a pretty efficient catch and shoot shooter as well. It just like took a ton of tough pull-ups in his role at Oklahoma, and that's going to drag your efficiency down. But he showed some more stuff in terms of creating with his handle to get into his shot later in his career. And I think the free throw percentage, while not like as important as I think maybe traditional like wisdom would suggest, definitely suggest, especially when it's 85, 85 plus on huge volume because he draws a ton of fouls. Then that's really promising. I'd probably still prefer Harper as a shooter long term, but I think it's like a real question, and I don't think it's crazy. I think very real argument for both guys ending up as better shooters.
Yeah, I think for Harper, and this maybe sounds like a cop-out, I trust him more as a scorer, overall scorer, and I trust him more as a shot creator, even though maybe pound for pound, Fears is right there with him.
Yeah, Fears was great at it, but like it's Harper as well. I mean, that's
right, and that's
no
what makes him special. And so, like, teams will be so fearful of Harper's driving ability, and they'll go under so early in his career that, like, if there is, I guess I'm saying I feel very confident about Harper reaching his ceiling, whatever you think that's going to be.
I think so as well.
And Fears, he's going to have to work harder for it. But I tend to trust his volume and touch indicators a bit more than Harper's volume in a vacuum. A lot of V words there. It's just that how it will actually play out in the league in terms of, again, opportunity, reps, how a defense is going to play them. I think all of that favors Harper and probably gives him a slight nudge, I suppose. But in terms of sort of pure shooting talent presently, I think that Fears probably has more pure shooting talent presently, is how
another guy with similar-ish, ballpark shooting indicators in college freshman year was Sexton, who was more efficient than Fears, but a little bit lower volume, lower free throw, lower long 2 efficiencies. And like that's a guy who his whole career basically has been an awesome shooter on volume. Right.
Yep.
So it can be quick for these guys with like the awesome touch. And it's just like basically nobody is like efficient on high volume pull-ups at like the high school, college, and especially high school level. It's just really rare to see. And I really do believe in Fears' ability to shoot. I think both are going to be good shooters, honestly.
I agree.
But I would say Fears is a little less likely. Like you said, I think Harper's just like a better bet to be good and to get reps. But even taking that out, I just think his kind of longer track record and proven volume and all that good stuff is probably just a little bit. But I think Fears is also like really good at relocating, and his off-ball feel is good and underrated, and that helps as well.
I really kind of wish, I don't think this is going to happen based on who the drafting personnel are and their reputation. It might be a little high for Fears, but I think Fears in New Orleans at 7.
I love that.
Especially because I think that his play style can learn a lot from CJ McCollum while CJ's still there.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
So I would really be kind of into that, but it's,
awesome. I don't think they do it because they traded for DeJounte.
They still do, but talent's talent, but they just love big so much that I just think they're going
that's
big.
The thing. But they have so much big that they're one of the best teams for a smaller guy. Like, I think people thought Fears would measure shorter than he did. Like, wasn't he like 6'2.5" without shoes? Like, I feel like that's pretty good for him.
Yeah, I think that's around. I think he was like Garland size. That was the side by side that they used.
Like, he's obviously a smaller guard, but like he's not crazy small. Like there's smaller guys in the league who made. Or like he's certainly shorter than like a Pritchard, who was a very good player in the playoffs this year and was good all year. So like, if you're good, you're good, right? And at some point where you can definitely argue about like, is this a player who you can build around like at the highest level? Maybe not, but I do think he's he's a player who's going to just fit in somewhere with the talent on offense. He's going to need some work on defense, but again,
he
that's
will.
The case for so many freshmen and. We'll see how that goes. But anyways, that was a good one. I like that question a lot. Next, we've got from O'Malley's. Thanks, Will. Jase Richardson isn't a first-round player and should probably be closer to the 40s. This is an interesting one because maybe I'm just out of touch, but I feel like I've never seen any like people be really low on Jase. Or it seems like I feel like like on the draft Twitter consensus board they put together at the end of the year, like the range on him is going to be lower than other guys. But I feel like it's always interesting to think about the worst case. So like, do you think there's any way that Jase is like not an NBA guy or just like totally flames out? Like how would that happen? Like what's the path there? Because it's kind of hard for me to see.
Yeah, I mean it's easy to bet against positional size for sure. And I don't feel this way about Jase. I've got Jase, I think, probably where he's likely to be drafted now, which is sort of like mid-teens, maybe a bit higher, but
late lottery-ish.
Yeah.
No,
but I think like to your point about 3-point volume, even though he was extremely efficient, his volume was like just okay, in terms of per 100, and his shot form is not terribly conducive, I think, to speeding up a lot more, in my opinion. I'm not a huge shot doctor, but the way he sets it up and sort of how he's tilted.
It is definitely like a set shot.
Right.
It's a little stiffer, which is weird because he's such a flexible player. So I wonder
if I agree. It is a little strange, but it's so like if you want to paper cut him to death, you can start to do it. I just think that Jase, it comes back to the feel that we keep returning to. His feel is so good, and his shooting, like he's such an intelligent off-ball player. And when they did start him finally at Michigan State, it was a pretty seamless transition. Like you can just see how that guy gets older and older and reaches his prime, that he will find ways to impact winning in the NBA. So that's sort of
Jase is a cool one for me, where I think he's an undoubtedly high field player who I don't think is that great of a passer. I think like that's generally like, feel and passing are used interchangeably by, a lot of people, which to some extent there's usually a lot of overlap, but Jase is like a brilliant off-ball player for his age. Like he is unbelievable at attacking off the catch with different footwork, finding space without the ball, cutting, relocating, being decisive, like just feeling where he needs to be. But then like his vision to me is not great. I think he's problematically risk averse at times. Like there's some wide ass open interior reads that he misses where he's coming off of like a curl screen on the baseline. They run this all the time for him. And two will go to Jase because he's an insane shot maker and is probably going to hit some crazy floater falling down and get an and one. So they send two to the ball and he just tries the shot anyway, which like to some extent I get, like he's very good at it and it makes sense why he'd take a lot of them. But I think that's kind of like something I worry about a little bit. Like if there is a world where Jase isn't good, like a smaller guard who really isn't like a great passer, that can definitely be volatile. Even though I think like his feels fine. He's not like a bad passer by any means. He's just like, I think he's just like fine, or maybe a little below average positionally.
And if he commands the kind of gravity in the NBA that he does off of those curls, and like he's already won, frankly. So like I agree with you, but I do veer like towards consensus and away from the heat of the take.
Yeah, I do as well. I mean, like you said, small guards who like aren't primaries can like always be volatile, right? And like he does have to be a really, really elite shooter for it to work. Probably, at least I would imagine. Or just it's like some sort of elite shot maker somewhere. Efficiency and volume wise, you'd think, where the volume is just like the issue. I could definitely imagine Jase getting his volume up, but it's hard for me without like great burst or like crazy advantage creation tools. Obviously, like the tough shot making is so insane, but just for me, like a small guard who can't really create his own shot super consistently and isn't an awesome passer, like I can definitely imagine like where those things are too. And I don't think he's a lock to be a good defender. I would probably bet on his defense just because of the feel. And he has some awesome like weak side blocks this season, and he can be really good when he's engaged. But like it's not a guarantee. Like he's not a lock to be a great defender to me, but he is. I would bet on him.
Yeah, I think we're aligned. I don't have much to add on that. Yeah.
Cool. So let's move on to the next one from at Willie Boy C says, my hot takes are that I like Liam McNeeley and Egor Demin compared to everyone else I interact with on draft Twitter. I think it's interesting because those are two of the guys like draft Twitter fades compared to consensus. I don't necessarily consider myself a part of draft Twitter as much these days, but I do agree with that. I generally fade both of those players. But I think again, it's always good to challenge against that kind of groupthink. And especially for McNeeley lately, I've kind of been feeling like maybe I'm too hard on him. Any idea what his most frequent play type was this season at UConn?
I would assume it would be like a catch and shoot three, but I feel like that's probably wrong.
Roll ball handler.
There you go.
Play type at UConn. Yeah. And he is just so incredibly unsuited for that role. I do think he's limited, and like he's legitimately, I think, the worst in this entire class at finishing layups in the half court, or just like finishing in the half court.
Numbers are so brutal there.
So brutal. He can grift his way to stuff with like the free throws, which is legit a good skill for him. Like he's awesome.
Like 87% of them. Yeah.
He's so crafty. And he's just like I see people like, oh, he only shot 33%. Like he has such a rock solid track record on high volume versatility for years dating back. Like I don't think there's any worry to me about his actual shooting quality. But yeah, I mean, like there is just going to be a place for giant shooters who are smart. Like I don't think he's like an incredible passer, but he's a pretty high field guy. He can make some secondary reads, and then hope. Defense, another big issue. His athleticism is quite poor. And the physical tools are definitely worrying and have scared me a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, he was so miscast. Like they needed him to do more stuff on ball than I'm sure he expected or wanted to do this year, if I had to guess.
Yeah, interesting dynamic between him and Caravan, because you would hope that as Caravan got older, he would take more of that usage, but he sort of can't do that. Yeah, right. He plateaued. Right.
I feel like he should have ended the draft 2 years ago.
I agree. He had a phenomenal year that first title year.
Quick aside, quick tangent. Are there any of the late, the recent draft withdrawals or stay-ins that you like really disagree with? Any decisions that, or like, even the ones that you most disagree with in terms of players either deciding to stay in the draft or withdraw their name?
Yaxel hurt me. Right in the heart.
I'm not even as high on Yaxel as some people, but like his stock was really good. Yeah. And it's just like hard to sustain that as an older prospect.
Yeah.
And I worry I love Yaxel. I think he's awesome. Even though like he's one of the players where like my enjoyment of him is much higher is higher than my like opinion of him.
But, I mean, he is one of the most fun players. Like
he's the main one. He's the main one. I would have said Phylon if he didn't drop out of the buzzer. I think that was the right call for sure.
Yeah,
for sure that was the right call. And the other one that's like not realistic, but I wonder about is Carter Bryant, who was always going to go with his level of buzz. But I just would have been so interested to see what he could do without like 12 usage.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are plenty of players who are like 0 usage role players as freshmen and end up adding usage in college and just kind of betting on that. But like, it's kind of hard to bet on as a one and done. And I think Carter can absolutely get there. I like him a lot. He's talented, but like, man, I feel like there's a world where he goes back to Arizona, balls out, and is top 10 pick. It's like a lock top 10 pick.
Where do you think he goes this year?
The rookie scale consensus board right now has him at 13. So, and I've seen quite a few like mainstream, like I'm pretty sure the Ringer loves him. Definitely mainstream, outlets who are just pushing Carter Bryant prop. So like his stock, I mean, maybe it's smokescreen, who knows, but he's also I could totally imagine teams going for just like the crazy physical, rangy, 6'8", efficient volume shooter. And again, I just like can't call turning down lottery money a mistake by any means. It's just not. But I do think there was potential for even more with him going back. And I kind of feel that way about Coward as well, but not as much.
Well, I think Coward, like this sort of rise, especially with his history against higher comp, like you really got to strike while the iron's hot. I think with Carter, it's an interesting question because it sounds like you're saying you agree with his decision to stay in, but you have a case for how it could be better developmentally for him to
exactly. It's not
withdraw.
like right. It's not we're like. I mean, again, like I can't say I disagree with any of these because they're getting life-changing money anyways. But like Yaxel, it's like I really do think staying in would have been most beneficial for his long-term NBA future.
Yeah, I will say with Carter though,
Carter, I don't think that's as much of the case.
It's reflective on something that you mentioned earlier that I agree with, which is that I think it is more, just developmentally speaking, because I agree with his decision to stay in. But developmentally speaking, I think it is more beneficial to get on-ball reps anywhere than it is to necessarily like if you're getting on-ball reps at some mid-major or even like a lower level than that. I still think there's like no replicating getting into that sort of decision-making rhythm. And the fact that Carter has not had a chance to do that is not like, I really like Carter. I probably like him. I will have him higher than 13th. I think I have him like between 8 and 12 right now. Sure. But he again, when you enter the NBA, the competition where you feel the competition level the most as like a raw player is that everyone's skill is so advanced. Like the guys who get minutes, even guys who are not high usage, their skill level on the ball tends to be very, very high. And so it's just a matter of it's that same sort of skill acquisition and how confident do you feel about Carter, like realizing all that. I think there's reason for optimism.
I definitely think he can. I'd lean, again, I feel like a hater because I have him like, I don't know, like 17, 18, but and like I wouldn't be crazy thrilled about him as a lottery guy, but like I think he's really good.
Yeah.
And it's just like a little aggressive for me, even though I understand it. And like he's a sick player. And he's just fun to watch.
But I think part of his rise has to do I think the low usage is almost benefiting him. Not from like a mystery box component, but it's because there's less identifiable flaws on his tape than someone where like Derik Queen's combine can just turn a team off. Whereas with Carter, you can't really identify what the nitpick is yet. And I think that's sort of
for my video I did on him. I was like going through all his drives. He had like 3 drives. It's like he's not good at it now, but there's like not tape. And like I went back to watch his high school and AAU stuff, and it was the same. But like this is not like there's nothing really there. But anyways. That was a long tangent. Thoughts on Egor Demin and McNeeley relative to consensus, which was the original question. I don't know how we got on. Sure.
I am relatively fading them. I don't know how bad, like, quote unquote, draft Twitter fades them because I think that Egor, at least, I think is an NBA player, which means
I think he's like a for sure first round caliber guy.
So that's what I'm saying. Like people who are like
Egor, I think is like. I don't love him, but I'd take him in the first round. He's worth it.
Right. And like, I feel less confident about McNeeley, but I don't know. It's all nebulous. I guess in terms of if this person, who submitted the thought thinks that they're like top 20 guys, it's hard for me to get there just because I think there's enough bets that I find more interesting or more projectable. But if you were
class, like you said,
there's like 15, 12 overall picks in this class.
It's a really good draft. Yeah, it's like the depth out to 20 is like unbelievable. Past that, you get a little shaky. But
I agree. But I think like if you were to tell me that they both end up as top 20 players in the class, I could understand it. I think that would end up being mildly disappointing for the class because I think McNeely's ceiling in particular is not very high. But
I think Egor is the one where it's like. I mean, I'm looking at the consensus about right now. Liam is 17, so he definitely dropped, and Egor is 14. Like, I think Liam top 20. Like I said, like it's whatever. Teams need big shooters, but this ceiling just seems so negligible to me. And there's a real floor, like absence of floor because of the physical tools. Whereas Egor, it's like his processing and like live dribble processing, live dribble feel, like court awareness as a passer, like with the skill, is truly a special trait. And like I think everything else is like very concerning to me, but at some point I would like to bet on just a guy of his size who is going to be he walks into the league as a top 15 passer, I think, like just in terms of pure skill and ability. The consistency and decision making is perfect by no means, but like maybe not top 15. That's probably aggressive, actually.
In terms of polish, I would disagree.
But like it's going to be.
He certainly has like
the highest
spark.
level
Yeah.
Like and I say this to someone who's like, I think I've honestly been like totally consistent, because people were having him like top 3 early season when he was killing UC Riverside in Idaho, and I pushed back against that a lot. And now people are like dropping him out of their like top 40s, and I'm pushing back against. I'm like, no, he's like not bad. He just isn't a, like legit.
I think he's a real victim of the 82-16 thing that you brought up, because that's his player type. The comp is giddy, and so there is not really proof of concept.
I honestly don't even think they're that similar. Aside from like,
I know, I'm just saying that's what everyone thinks.
I've seen that concept for sure.
Yeah,
but no, I think like people are also this version of Egor Demin is not a guy who can play in the playoffs, no doubt. But like this is not going to be the final version of him, ideally, right? Where I just really believe that you can get something out of a guy that tall who can pass that much, and just get him passable on defense, passable shooting, and there's a player there. There really. I don't think it's like enough to be a star. But like, if you told me in 7 years Egor like made an all-star team, it wouldn't like, I'd be surprised, but I wouldn't be like totally stunned, because you can see like the foundation of something really special there.
And he's young enough to where maybe there's some physical development.
Whereas Liam, if you told me that, I would be floored.
Yeah, I would too. I would really want to see it.
If you told me like, oh, this guy's an awesome role player on a great team, I'd be like, yeah, it makes sense. I can see how that happened. But if it's like, yeah, this guy's an all-star, and I'm like, wow, really? Like, is this like a Kyle Porter all-star, or like what's this?
Yeah. I think there's basically a 0% chance for Liam in that capacity. But yeah.
Anyways, on to the next one. At Ice Melon says Nique Clifford will end up being a top 5 player from this draft in 5 years. I think we're both going to be very into this.
It gives me the warm and fuzzies for sure.
Yeah,
I can start off on Nique.
It's a very safe bet, I'll say. Like it's a good hot take, because it's definitely a hot take. Like saying any non-lottery consensus guy is going to be top 5 player in the draft is a hot take, but it's a smart one because he's so safe to me as well. But I'll let you take this one. Thoughts on Nique and his path to returning top 5 value?
So in contrast to his mid-major mates, Cedric and Rasheer, like there's no question that like Nique is a current better basketball player than those two. And so like his overall, not only his passing, which I think is probably his most underrated skill and what sort of improved the most during his time in Colorado State. His finishing, his ability to finish with either hand is really, really, really good. And I think his defense is good, like not amazing. And I don't think that his low-key, even though he's very athletic, his build and he's like 185 pounds or whatever he is at age 23. So there's not a ton left.
I think he measured it at 200, actually, 203.
I think that's sort of like a combine 200.
Yeah.
I
know, but I'm like, ooh, he got over 200. Okay, we'll take it.
That to me, that is actually his slenderness is, I think, the biggest thing that keeps me away from being like, yes, maybe top 5, just because I think the league is headed to a point, in addition to having everyone who can do as much as possible of everything, which I think Nique does fit that sort of alleyway. You're just getting to so much like power athleticism at every position that is going to be very hard for him to replicate. And he would have to become he would have to graduate from being, I think, a very good shooter to like an outrageous shooter in order to return that kind of value. I'm not going to like write it off entirely, but he's towards the end of his development curve.
The handle improvement could get there too, just because his burst is so crazy. Like, I believe I tracked this a little bit ago. He has the most self-created half-court dunks of anyone in this class, I believe.
He had some awesome ones. Yeah,
like he is like consistently beating guys off the dribble, and of course that's not a statistically significant sample, but it's just I think more kind of interesting tidbits for what you see on tape, which is like legitimate, awesome first step, fluidity, vertical explosion. Obviously, he's long and he's got good stride length as well.
Yeah.
I just really trust guys who have improved a lot over their college career as consistently as a guy like Nique is. Like, even though he is an older player for sure, I don't think it's like fair to say. I mean, you just look at this year-to-year improvement, like everything, BPM, usage went up dramatically. The fact that this season he went up to 28 usage and his true shooting dropped by less than 1% and his assist to turnover stayed exactly the same while, adding a bunch of assists as well. Most efficient. I think the mid-range creation to me was, you said the passing was your like favorite thing that he added. I feel like the mid-range creation to me is like, he just became like an efficient volume shot maker from all over the floor. And not that I think he's going to be that in the league, but that just bodes well for translation. Like, I've talked so much about how this channel is like, especially for older players. I've talked a bunch on this channel about how, like, for projecting guys to be NBA role players, I want them to be college stars, in some way, right? And Nique passes that with flying colors, as does like a guy like Jameer Watkins. Shout out to him. Pass that with flying colors, right? Which is a test that we don't really know if like a Cedric Coward is going to pass.
Right. True.
Right.
But go ahead.
He obviously could, but I was going to say, Nique, like, returning top 5 value, like we said, unlikely. I mean, the most likely way is just a lot of players disappoint, and Nique is like I don't know, the 4th best player on a conference finals team, and that's good enough.
I think I agree with that. I'll say that your point about him, the amount of creation that he added, like getting to the heights that he got to, which I think I've said that I believe that from February on, when he really was like unconscious throughout the end of conference play, through his conference tournament and in the NCAA tournament, that was like a good 6-week sample where I thought he was one of the 5 best players in the country, period.
Oh, he was unbelievable. His defense was like slipped a little this year, but I think that's totally excusable considering his usage and role. But it was still good. It just wasn't like awesome like it was the year before.
And I think you could make a very good case that in that game against Maryland, where Queen hit that buzzer beater, that he was the best player on the floor. Nique, like bell to bell. And so, like even
the Queen was awesome in that game too.
He was. I think that his maturation from where he was age-wise to where he is now seems relatively unprecedented. You get guys who pop who are like not really NBA players because they just get older and they become the guy on their team. But to go from where he was to where he is now, like as a prospect.
Yeah, just the amount of skills he's added. Well, like I would have taken him in the top 25 last year, but like I take him in the
I would too.
I feel like normally I'm very hard on older players. Like their upside is just historically so capped. But I mean, again, it's like I say for other things, nothing is always right. And there are older players who end up being like high level impact guys on great teams. And I think the one thing you really need, right, is just that consistent development track, right? It's like, have you shown that you can improve and change your game and adapt? Because if you haven't shown that in college, like why would I believe you can do it in the league? But he obviously has shown that he can do it, and I don't think it's fair to count out him continuing to do that.
And in sort of like an elevator pitch kind of way, he has 3-level touch. He has that athleticism that you talked about, and he still is such a diligent, connective passer. Like someone with his athletic gifts,
good, like manipulative passer. It's crazy how like skilled he is at that for like a player of his archetype.
Like, I just think it's so guaranteed that he's going to get minutes and going to get a real chance. And with his touch, like if he attacks a closeout and he has this passing vision, but he has the space to finish, he's going to finish. So I could certainly see him returning a top 10 value. I'd be like, yes, I believe that is very much on the table for him.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty decent odds.
Yeah. Top 5 is tough, but I just love Nique so much.
Same.
Love him so much.
He's phenomenal, and this is a hot take I really like. Let's go with one or two more. At Bama Big Bird says Danny Wolf's combination of ceiling and floor should make him a top 10 pick in this draft. So Danny Wolf, Chuck, I know there are people who really like him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's like, I haven't seen so much buzz around him lately, but there are people who are big fans. So where do you sit here with this hot take?
I like the heat of the take in terms of ceiling, not necessarily in terms of floor. I think there's a real floor with him that is kind of scary with his turnover percentage. Like, he did not score around the rim nearly as well as you would like for a guy who can handle that well. Obviously there are defensive questions with him. So I think there's a very real floor. Now, ceiling, if you believe that he can, with NBA space and talent around him, get some easy money as a finisher to where he's become sort of league average efficient or whatever with some of his guard skills, ceiling, you can start to sell me on it a little bit. At least I can get within like the ballpark of the Heat. But floor, I think, is still scary enough that I would fade it. I think he dances the line between scarcity and novelty a bit too much for my liking.
I love that. That's beautiful.
He's certainly a novel player, but there have been novel players that have come and gone. It's
English would have loved that, and the English tutor in me loves that.
I'm a former English major, so yeah, I'm with you. That's how I would say is that.
No, I absolutely agree, and I lean the other way. I'm not like I've struggled with Wolf's ceiling. I think the floor is kind of obvious. Like, it's easy to see how it can't work. I mean, there's the size and his level of ball handling and passing. I do think there's probably an offensive floor there, and his mobility is pretty good for a guy his size. Like, there really is something to work with. Yeah. Which I think could give him a floor. But just hard for me to see a ceiling that high without the scoring, unless he becomes a really elite shooter. Yeah. It seems kind of hard to imagine. But yeah, the stuff he can do with the ball in his hands, the stuff that he can do in terms of pick and roll passing. But he is just I'm usually not particularly hard on turnovers, but his turnover issues are issues. Yeah. In my pass charting stuff that I've been doing, he ranks first by a country mile second. I was looking at the wrong guy. In terms of the percent of their pressured plays that are turnovers, and I believe he ranks third in passing turnovers overall, or actually fourth. But he is such his decision making is crazy, and normally I trust players this talented to scale down, and I do think he can. I think that's his path, right? Mm-hmm. But right, it's just people compare him to Derik Queen a lot, and they're like, why is Wolf not a first round pick and Queen's a top 5 pick or whatever to you? And it's the scoring and the creation difference. Wolf is a good college post up guy, but he can't create easy shots for himself off the dribble, where that's all Queen does every single game.
Well, and you think that's what the guard skills would do for a guy that size. You would expect him to get easy shots and find a way to do it. Yeah.
It's just a reframing of what those skills mean now. Where those skills can get you paid as a dribble handoff hub, a floor spacer, which I think Wolf can be an okay shooter. It definitely wouldn't shock me. But that can get you paid, and that just can help you a lot as a complementary player. I think back to talking about the playoffs, your complementary players being able to put the ball on the floor is so damn important.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Players who just cannot dribble really struggle because defenses will run them off the line. They'll force them into spots that are uncomfortable. Like you see a player like Lou Dort, who is a legitimately awesome shooter now, who you don't want to leave open, and yet he really struggles when he gets run off the line and is a pretty negative player off the dribble. So it's just such an important thing in the playoffs, and I think that's going to help Wolf for sure. So maybe it's he's a he ends up being just like a crazy weirdo, valuable, complementary player in a perfect situation. But it's just a little tough for me to bet on, even though like he's obviously fun and the appeal is clear. And he's
And
a
I
guy
think
who like the NBA will be better for it if he ends up working out. Like he'll just be cool.
And I think he to me is a candidate for like a second draft opportunity. I think he's enticing enough to get multiple chances, but I think his drafting team will be dealing with this turnover stuff, and just like coaches will be pulling their hair out, and they'll just be like, "How can I trust you to like help us win a game when this is what you're going to do off the dribble? When I don't want your usage very high." So like I think it might take him a bit to find his path.
For sure. I agree. Let's move on to probably the last one we're going to do, which is at Gone Taker says, I've told you this before, but I think it would be cool if you could discuss the possibility of Maxime Raynaud. I need to learn how to say his name. Raynaud. Yeah, I thought it was Raynaud. Being the best center prospect in this draft. While being far-fetched, I think he has the rarest selection of offensive skills of any center in this class. I mostly just have this because I'm curious to hear what you think about Raynaud. Because I've been pretty low on him, and especially in like I guess it depends on who you count as centers, like Queen or Murray Boyles or like Jedi Broom. Is he a center? But just like it's hard for me to imagine him being a lot better than like Sorber. But I'm curious to hear what you have to think about this.
It's funny. I'm relatively optimistic on Raynaud. I have him within a few picks of Sorber, actually, but I like Sorber a lot. It's just that I do think what Raynaud has. First of all, what you said about who qualifies as a center is very applicable because I think it applies to Raynaud. I don't really know what defensive scheme at center you can put him in the NBA and like feel good, but I think as a shooter, what he has is legitimately scarce. If we're talking about scarcity versus novelty, at his size, like no one else his size shoots the way that he does in this draft. So, and the fact that he can put the ball on the deck, and like if someone does run him off the line, makes me think that there is a real place for him. It's just in terms of if we're comparing him to Sorber, let's say, I just recorded an episode with Matt Powers where we talked about like Hansen, Sorber, Murray Boyles, and Queen in terms of all those guys. Not all of them are going to like be centers at the NBA level, but they all have sort of theories. Like Raynaud is he is so far behind those guys athletically or in terms of like frame and strength and projecting sort of a power kind of player that he is going to, I just think he's going to be like a rotational big at best. So if that is who he is, he can get paid that way. And I think he can provide some really solid value in the league. But I think the league is headed for every big starter in the league is going to be either more athletic or like much stronger, just much physically stronger and more versatile defensively than he is.
Definitely important with him. 7-footer, sub 30 free throw rate, not the best thing. Obviously I think that's reductive, but like even a guy like Malawash, who I think has a lot of issues with physicality and like needs to improve a lot in terms of his ability to handle contact and take bumps. He was like 40 free throw rate, and which is not great for a center, but it's fine. But yeah, I do worry quite a bit about Raynaud's physicality. His driving is my favorite thing he does. Like he is so goddamn fluid for a 7-footer.
Right.
The way he can dip his shoulder and like string a move or two together and like dribble into a post up, legitimately very impressive. I have a little hesitation with his shooting just because of how massive his like guarded versus unguarded splits are, where he just
interesting. I don't know them. What are they?
I don't have them off the top of my head, but I think guarded is like significantly under 30% and unguarded significantly over. And it's just like he needs so much time to get his shot off, which does worry me. Like I'm not a huge mechanics guy. It's like overhead. Like I'm not a huge mechanics guy, and I tend to think that can improve. But for a guy whose like appeal is shooting, I have a little more question about what that actually looks like. I would probably bet on him to be a shooter. Like, it just makes sense that he would improve on that because he obviously has the touch and like the ability to like even like flash some shots off the dribble at times. He's like got some good mid-range post scoring. I could see him developing into like a guy who ends up being kind of like a volume bench scorer.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like a weird thing to think about when you're thinking of like a stretch five, but like he could be a really quite good scorer. But I also think I have a theory that Maxime Raynaud's stock and he should thank Quinton Post for.
Absolutely.
He should give Quinton Post a cut of his check. That is, he is going to help get him drafted highly. And I'm not like crazy about that because Post, I think, showed a lot of limitations, but is a good player. And again, if you can replicate that in like the 20s or whatever, like your ceiling might not be crazy, but.
And Raynaud significantly more fluid than Quinton is, and Quinton's a good player. So like,
absolutely.
But yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly right.
I'm stunned as useful as he was. I did not see Post being anything close to that ever.
Me neither. And it goes to show if you are if you can present a 5-out look, and even if it only works when you're on a heater, that heater is so valuable to your team in the regular season that like that's why I have Raynaud where I've got him. Like, it's just that I really think that he is going to do that in spurts for his team. Definitely.
Like, he's not someone who I'm high on particularly. I'm actually like very low compared to consensus, but like I don't think he's a bad player by any means. Actually, I'm not that low. I'm only like 10 spots off, like mainstream consensus at least. But yeah, I just don't necessarily buy anything else enough but the driving, which I think is ridiculously cool. And yeah, like the strength, physicality thing. But I trust guys with his like fluidity and size, and he's still not so old that he can't continue to get better. No. And he has, again, not to the level of Nique, I think, but definitely has improved every year, and has become a legitimately impactful like centerpiece. I also wish he was a better passer.
Yes, I agree. Although he had flashes that I liked,
true,
but
there are good flashes. But I'm like a little better than like stretched out Bobby Portis. I don't know. Probably better than that. That's a low bar. But. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly understand why people tab him as like a big sleeper, just because he has like the rare physical traits and potential skill package. But yeah, I'm too probably optimistic about this center class, especially if you're counting like Queen as the center or Colin Murray-Bowles as the center. But
no, I mean, it's another big sort of cluster group within the class. It's like a signature grouping within the class is who is a center? How did these bigs look in quote unquote double big lineups? You know, how do you deploy them? Because a lot of them have sort of unconventional skill sets for putative bigs. So yeah, I agree.
That was our last question, but I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. We did all these good hot takes from everyone. I want one from you now. Give me a draft hot take that you have. I mean, I guess it can be like repeating something we talked about, but it would be better for content if it could be something that we haven't talked about as much.
Yeah, so for like a top of draft hot take, it's that there's a good chance that I finish with Kon number 2 ahead of Dylan.
Actually, I did have a question about this that I cut. I'll find it because we already talked about Kon. At Routy DePaul 76. If I'm being bold, Kon will be the second best player from this draft. So
shouts to my guy.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't be there, but let's hear it.
It's this is going to sound dismissive, and it's not because I have Dylan 3 and I think Dylan's really good. It's just it's the question of what sort of like what Dylan's role is going to be is an initiator. Like there is no like that's what he's going to be, which means that the team that drafts him is going to tab him not as their third best player, but as at minimum as their second best player. Because he's going to have to command a ton of usage in order to, number one, become like the player he's drafted to be, but also in keeping with his play style. Like in his heart, that is who he is. And I like a lot about his game, but that specific initiator position in the league is so stacked that for him to consistently beat like NBA level top 2 options. I think there needs to be, again, like a lot of even further skill acquisition. And his handle is ridiculous. His driving is ridiculous. His finishing is ridiculous. But like, I think that he's going to have to become ridiculous in the mid.
Yeah, just the intermediate game for sure.
I think his footwork is going to have to be even better. I think that his touch is going to have to be really, really good because I don't think that he is an exceptional athlete. It's just that, like, if you compare him to, ironically, he's a different player. But if you compare him to his likely teammate in the short term, De'Aaron Fox, De'Aaron is an awesome player and was an awesome prospect. And has had, I think he made All NBA the Beam Team year.
Yeah,
he's like really scraped some heights, but the sort of like within the initiator class, just with that caveat, the like relative kind of up and down that De'Aaron has had, and the question about in the Spurs position, they had the real luxury of sort of what Zach Lowe calls shopping at the superstar grocery store because so many guys are desperate to play with Wemby. Their commitment to him was not a bad commitment in terms of assets. The question about it is in terms of opportunity cost. And I can see, I'm not talking about Dylan's fit with him necessarily, but I could see Dylan following a similar track where he's really good. His highs are really, really high. But it's about whether or not there is an opportunity cost to building around him, given the caliber of players that he needs to outperform. Whereas with Kon, I believe so much in his, first of all, in his like ability as an off-ball player. Like, I think he will slot in relatively quickly in his career as like a viable number 3 option that can scale on a really good team. And I think that his driving and his ability to create very simple space with his physicality, which is chained to his like all court feel, like I think he can, in short, get to his spots and hit his shots in a way that's going to scale up, not to a ridiculous degree, but to enough of a degree where he can find himself. I think there's a smoother path for him to find himself playing in like very big games in very big playoff series. The counter is that like Dylan's going to play with Victor Wembanyama, so maybe that's all out the window. But I'm just like
Dylan as well I feel like I'm higher on his off-ball projection than a lot of people. One, because I trust his defense, and just having like that size over a guy like Fox is like really useful. And Fox has had his moments as a defender. Like he's had seasons of like being really productive on the ball. Really disruptive. But like it's harder to sustain that as a smaller player, and Harper is not a small guard by any means. Like he can cosplay wings sometimes with his frame. And I think he's an underrated guy in terms of like off-ball feel. I mean, he's nowhere near a guy like Kon by any means. But like I do think just because he's never really had to play off the ball, I wrote about this in an article a couple weeks ago. But like the only real sample he ever played fully off the ball was in FIBA. Like when he was 17 playing U19s with like Trey and I can't remember anyone else on that team. Asa was on that team, I think. Maybe like Mark Armstrong. But I was always so impressed by his ability to just adapt into that situation, be a low usage guy, cut, attack, closeout. And I think like when he got to do that at Rutgers, like playing like Don Bosco with some other like D1 or, college basketball talent, but no one on his level. And then at Rutgers, obviously you have Ace, but even Ace is like not on his level at this stage. So I do think there's a little bit of low hanging fruit there, but I agree that like the case for Kon would be that, as well as like, what if we're just like underrating Kon's upside as a scorer, right? Because
that's what I think is possible, at least. Yeah.
Somebody said this to me. I don't know if it was like a Twitter reply or someone in DM. I don't remember, that they were like, Kon is legitimately one of the best combinations of shooting and processing of a prospect in recent history. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. Because like the guys that come to my mind for that are who? Like LaMelo, Cade,
Halliburton.
Halliburton. Obviously, he's not that level, or probably not that level, maybe. But it's like, yeah, he does have some really special combinations of traits that I think could lead him to like developing into a star. And I think he's a better athlete than he gets credit for. Like he's not amazing by any means, but specifically his first step
Yeah.
His
Oh,
first
yeah.
step is legitimately solid. Like, it's not blazing by any means, but he can actually create separation off the dribble. Like, is it a crazy hot take to say I think his first step is better than Trey Johnson's?
No,
That's
I
how I
don't think
feel.
so.
I mean, I think it's better than. It's obviously not VJ.
Well, and Trey likes, and I really like Trey, but Trey likes to dance a little bit and
Yeah, I
probe
like
when
Trey as well.
when he doesn't necessarily have the skill set to dance and probe.
Speed is probably better than Kon's, but like his acceleration, I don't think it's.
And Kon's first step gets quicker because his decision making is so quick. He's like, we are going, like we're not wasting time, and so that's why.
Concerns
Yeah,
with him offensively are just scoring at the basket, and like he's crafty, he's got good touch, but like I could imagine a world where Kon just really struggles to like have high efficiency on ball because he can't score as well as he needs to at the rim. But like I don't think that's again, like I can see ways he avoids that as well. So I can accept the Kon at 2 hot take. I mean, I have him in a tier that extends from 3 to 5. So like I would be cool with this. I think I would really be happy if the Sixers took him at 3 for them. I think that would be an excellent pick.
I would too. Yeah.
And so yeah, I guess if I can't, if I have him basically 3, I can't really hate having him at 2. But it is just like the gap to me between Harper and everyone else is pretty massive. Where maybe that's my hot. I don't know. I mean, this is really a hot take, but like, there's like I feel like there's definitely circles on like the draft internet that have like quite a few prospects in that tier 2, whether it's like Murray Boyles or like VJ or like a Sengwe or whoever. I just think Harper is so clear and ahead of those guys because of what he can do in his advantage creator and as a passer. But like, I feel like that's not like that crazy of a hot take because a good portion of people would just agree with it.
Yeah, I think in any draft, again, with Cooper being the exception, which we're happy about, like there's always a certain percentage that's going to, like there's a certain percentage that's going to really want to put Dylan through the ringer and I don't think that percentage is any higher than normal. I just think it sort of comes with the territory.
I think my actual hot take that is, I don't know how much like is the Queen top 3 thing, which I think like, I mean, a lot of people love Queen, but like mainstream just doesn't feel that way. And I feel very strongly that he's worth a top 5 pick because his ceiling is absolutely crazy. If he hits, you're not going to want to be one of the teams that missed on him.
So let me ask you then about that, because I am not all the way there with you, but I'm in your ballpark more than his skeptics. So I would imagine that you would think that his ceiling is chained to him getting in better shape. Like he will need to get in better shape. And so if he does, because that's what is so attractive to me, if he sheds whatever he needs to shed, and
I think,
then what, like, how are you seeing like an all NBA player in there? And if he's an all NBA player, is he an all NBA as a 5 or is he an all NBA as a 4?
Some kind of positional anomaly. I don't know what position is Sabonis.
A 5. Sabonis 5.
Yeah, probably. Is Şengün a 5?
Yes.
Yeah, probably. I think Queen can be a 5 in that vein, and like I think you can see players with like positional weirdness, and it's kind of easy to see like the differences in how you build around these guys matters with like the Kings, and obviously these are Queens about like they're all different players, but there's some similarities in terms of limited outside shooting and shot blocking as a center. But you see like a team like Houston, who obviously they've got a ways to go, but like they are constructing around him defensively in a perfect way with like long athletic defenders, and it's allowed him to really improve his like footwork and his drop defense, and his switching has gotten so much better. But then like Sabonis hasn't had like Keegan Murray is the only wing he's ever played with, and like Jake LaRavia. Shout out Jake LaRavia, by the way.
Yeah, your piece. Shout out to Jake. Go Deeks. Yeah.
But yeah, I think Queen is a guy who requires more intentionality to build around than a lot of guys would. But to me, his ceiling is worth it. Like I truly could see a guy who's just an unstoppable, like interior scorer, advantage creator, hones in the decision making, becomes a playmaker, and then just like locks in on defense. Because his defense is obviously not good at the moment, but he has like high level moments and flashes with the way that he can move his feet, and his hands are lightning quick. he'll have these moments where he just like processes a play off the ball so quickly. And it's like, why were you falling asleep the last 5 plays when you can do that? It's like,
I think it's the conditioning.
yeah,
I think that's the quickest
my
answer.
other
Yeah.
thing for Queen's conditioning is that like he has a lot of room to grow, but he's improved, I think, pretty significantly every year. Like he, even last year at Montverde, to me, he was not this explosive, not this kind of twitchy because of some of the extra weight. And then obviously you go back and look at his like earlier career stuff. But yeah, I think it's obviously going to be the motor and just like convincing NBA teams he wants to play defense. But yeah, he's someone. I mean, the draft to me is just really about finding these like franchise changing guys, especially on cost controlled, contracts, having them under control financially as much as you can. And Queen, I think, there's a real chance that I have a hard time seeing him just like being out of the league because of how skilled he is and how athletic.
No, I don't think.
And just how crazy explosive and his change of direction and his touch. Like he's just gonna find some way to do something. But yeah, there's definitely a chance where he doesn't end up working. But I mean,
if I like the way I think about him, the way that I can't really drop him out of, I think I might end up with him like 6th or something. But I can't drop him any lower than that. Is that like, if you were to ask me who is the most talented player, like with the ball in their hands over 6'7", it's Cooper. Who is the next most talented player with the ball in their hands over 6'7" in the draft? It's Derik. I wrote something for the Philly Voice. Shout out Adam Aronson, who reached out talking about like different options for Philly at 3, and he wanted me to make a case for Queen. And I think I wrote in there that like Derik probably looks at all these other guards like Trey or Kon, maybe even Dylan. And in his mind, he's like, I'm a better guard than all those guys. And he like is.
And he kind of is for some of them.
Inconveniently kind of correct about that. It's just,
he absolutely is about quite a few of those guys.
And that's and then you're like, well, if he's actually like
not in all classes, but this class, I guess.
Like a better, more complete guard, maybe not with 3-point volume and shot making, obviously, but like and just like doing guard stuff, then like, yeah, what are we doing? And it's a very appealing theory. Like he is very appealing to me. Just about everything he does, including like tanking the combine, just endears him to me more. Where he's like, ball up top. What are we doing here? Come on, guys. Did you watch me? Like,
combine is so crazy. I'm just like look. It's not good it's not a good thing that he just like mailed the combine.
I know. I love him. I can't stay mad at him.
No, I mean, I tend to think people will, maybe that ends up being a signal, but I do think people will probably weigh more into that when on tape he's clearly an elite athlete. Obviously, limited vertically, that's his main issue, and that's genuine. But like, you just watch him throw on his drives, any highlights, like guys that size don't move like that.
Right. I agree.
I think my last hot take related thing that I was just looking through my board, I have Kobe Brea 1 spot above Liam McNeeley.
I don't think that's too. I mean, well, like it might be hot for where they go, but I totally get it. Yeah. He's a much better shooter.
Kobe Brea is like one of the 5 or so best pure shooters across a college career that I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Ridiculous.
He's in Sam Hauser air.
Yep.
And that's a guy who I'm taking early second, late first round any day. And McNeeley, he's going to be a good shooter, but cannot confidently predict him to be better than Brea.
Yeah. My toward back of draft hot take is that I fully support RJ Lewis staying in the draft, and I would take him in the first round.
Interesting. I forgot that you're high on him because I definitely haven't been. What's your quick pitch? Because I don't want to keep you any longer.
I did an episode with CT Fazio on him and Zuby pre-tournament. I love Zuby, by the way. I wish he were in this draft, but I think that RJ, his career has been pretty strange from where he started. He was not a heralded recruit at all, started at UMass and transferred over, but he always has found ways to score. And I think that the easiest knock on him is his efficiency in doing so, which is fine. But I think the stuff that he shows on tape as an athlete with his first step and how quickly he gets off the ground, his ability to get off the ground very quickly is a skill that I bet on a lot with perimeter guys in the NBA. And I think his defensive base and I think how I project him to get over screens, I think is going to get him a place in the league. I don't know that he will, like, I'm projecting him at end of first, so not projecting him as a starter, but I think in the way that he plays kind of reminds me, not to the same maybe success level, but kind of like Dylan Brooks-ish. And Dylan gets a lot of crap, and that's fine, but like unquestionable, yeah, like a successful NBA player. And I think that RJ has a similar potential to be a defensive pest who can be like a frustrating shot taker at times, can sort of bite off more than he can chew.
Actually, yeah, I can imagine that.
But
I do really like his handle at his size. Like, that's always been impressive. His ability to like get it in and out of moves and create space with his fluidity. He just like doesn't have any real burst or like explosion to capitalize on that. But yeah, I do think there's like some interesting skill movement. Also, someone I need to watch more, because I kind of figured he'd be staying in the draft, and I would like to refresh, or going back to college basketball.
Yeah,
but anyways,
I like him. Yep.
Yeah. Anyways, thank you so much to Chuck for all of your generous time. Please plug whatever you'd like.
Thank you. My podcast, Chucking Darts NBA and Draft Podcast. Yeah,
I'll link his YouTube and his Twitter and all that in the description.
Yeah, Blue Sky, all that good stuff. I'm hopefully gonna write. I usually come out with my board the week of the draft, which is not when I want to. It's just when I can. But I'm hopefully gonna come out with something written earlier this year. But follow me. My clip work has been mostly on Blue Sky, but I'm now sort of doing it both with the increased attention this time of year.
I wish I liked Blue Sky more. I wish Blue Sky had more juice. Honestly, I try to use it just because it's like better for my soul, but I'm just like,
we're all just playing the game. I don't really begrudge anyone on either side. If you want to see like all of the clips I've commented on, go to Blue Sky to look up the archive, because that's like all my feed is. But yeah, just follow me. Thank you very much.
Blue Sky for sure.
Yep.
But yeah, that's it. If anyone's actually watched this the whole way through, you're the best. I really appreciate you. I love you all anyway for watching this. It's so crazy that people actually watch these. But anyways, like, subscribe, comment, hit the bell, all the things that the YouTubers say. And have a good day or night whenever you're watching this.